For the last 2 days, all eyes were on Lithuania. The question being asked was whether or not NATO will make Ukraine a member. Well, the message from the NATO summit in Lithuania is loud and clear. Ukraine's future is in NATO, says the military alliance. I repeat, Ukraine's future is in NATO. But what about its present? Well, that will need to change in order for this future to materialize. In other words, Ukraine will have to end the war with Russia for it to enter the NATO. This, again, is something that NATO members have made clear. Is Ukraine even winning the war? Not so far. Ending the war or trying to end the war with Russia, starting with sitting on the negotiation table, comes invariably with the prospect of compromise, the prospect of ceding land. Forget Crimea, Ukraine may be forced to give away Donbass and some of its surrounding areas. And not like Kiev is spoiled for choice, it must lose land to win the NATO membership. And what will it choose? It is a catch-22. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has promised not to rest until he wins back every inch of Ukrainian land, Crimea included. Will he want to be seen as a leader who has failed in delivering on his promises? Well, on paper, Ukraine has all the rights to join the NATO. NATO's original 1949 treaty grants any European country the right to ask to join. And this policy is central to NATO. Obviously, Ukraine needs to meet certain criteria. Ukraine needs to demonstrate a commitment to democracy, individual liberty, and support for the rule of law. And there also needs to be, in fact, there must be unanimous consensus. In other words, approval from all NATO member countries. And Ukraine falls short. On Tuesday, the leaders said in their communique summarizing the summit's conclusions that Ukraine can join when allies agree and conditions are met. Also, the country is infamous for corruption. This very war has seen numerous instances of graft, but the NATO is willing to make the road easier for Ukraine. Meanwhile, as a consolation prize, NATO members have come up with a new NATO-Ukraine Council, one with a seat reserved for Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky attended its inaugural meeting. That apart, did he really achieve much at the NATO summit, or was it a damn squib for Ukraine? Or did NATO fail Ukraine after provoking Russia into a war? Well, the answer depends on the color of lens through which you look at the war. The fact of the matter is, Zelensky is going back without an invitation to NATO. But NATO says Ukraine is closer than ever to NATO membership. But how close exactly is the question? You see, there is no way to define or quantify that. And this is exactly what Zelensky is unhappy about, that there is no timeline. Zelensky is calling this unprecedented and absurd because closer than ever can mean 5 years or even 10. And NATO, by the way, seems to be okay with that. What it is not okay with is a war with Russia, which it will invariably be dragged into the very moment it allows Ukraine to join NATO. The alliance believes that a war against one member is a war against all, and if Ukraine enters NATO in the middle of war, the other NATO members will automatically be dragged into Ukraine's war. The question that's being asked is, does an immediate NATO membership for Ukraine contribute to Europe's stability, or does it destabilize it even further? A direct conflict between the US and Russia, or much of Europe and Russia, will be disastrous. And NATO is desperate to avoid both. Before flying to Lithuania for the NATO summit, Biden had told an American news network, and I'm quoting, "I don't think there is unanimity in NATO about whether or not to bring Ukraine into the NATO family now, at this moment, in the middle of a war." Quick history. It was Joe Biden who had urged the NATO to accept Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic as member states in the late 1990s. This was following the collapse of the Soviet Union. But now, with Ukraine consumed in a war, Joe Biden is treading much, much more carefully. So, how long will it be before the war ends? It began in February 2022. It is July 2023 now. There are no signs of either side scaling down the offensive, and Ukraine's counteroffensive, in fact, is in full swing as I speak. And Russia has not stopped attacking major Ukrainian cities. So, back to the question. When and where does this end, and how? We know that China has come up with a peace deal. Chinese envoys have met officials from both Russia and Ukraine to discuss this deal. But you must remember that the deal makes no mention of withdrawal of troops. In other words, the areas that Russia has occupied, the areas where the Kremlin has managed to position its troops, remain with Russia. And we are looking at quite a large chunk of area, by the way, including major cities like Donetsk, Mariupol. So is Ukraine willing to make peace with this status quo? Like I began by saying, it is a catch-22. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.